Welcome to the Holy Land and this biblical site of Bethlehem. We are at the Church of the Nativity where Jesus Christ was born.
Before the first star ignited, before the void had shape or boundary, there was only God. Eternal, singular, and sovereign. No universe, no time, no creation, just the infinite. And in that infinite presence was another Jesus. Not yet born of flesh, not yet the teacher who walked Galilee, but present not as God, not as the Creator, but as one intimately known by the Creator, a vessel, a bearer of purpose, one appointed before time itself awoke. He was not the Almighty, he did not wield omnipotence, yet he stood in the light of divine intention, chosen, cherished, prepared, chosen before stars were born, before gravity held planets in place, before the fabric of reality existed. This is the mystery the Bible buries in plain sight, a secret so vast, so overlooked, that it reshapes our understanding of Jesus. Who was Jesus before the creation of the world? Not powerful in himself, but purposeful. Not equal with God, but one whom God glorified. Not divine by nature, but set apart by divine design. This story is not of supremacy, but of sacred appointment. It echoes in Scripture, it hides in ancient words, it waits for the heart willing to see. In the Gospel of John, chapter 17, we find not a sermon, but a prayer. Not words for the crowd, but a plea to the one who sent him. In this most intimate of moments, Jesus says, "Now, Father, glorify me together with yourself, with the glory I had with you before the world existed," as recorded in John 17:5. This is not a declaration of equality, it is a remembrance, a yearning for reunion, a reaching back to a time before time, to a love bestowed before creation began. This is not the language of a God seeking his throne. It is the language of a son remembering his calling. The glory he speaks of is not the glory of rule, but the glory of being chosen, the glory of being held in God's plan, of being the one whom God would send. Genesis opens the Bible with the words, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," as told in Genesis 1:1. The Hebrew word for God here is Elohim, a plural noun paired with a singular verb, not a grammatical error, but a theological mystery, a hint, a sign. One God, yes, but with something hidden inside, an intention, a mission, and one chosen to fulfill it. Jesus prays again in John 17:4, saying, "I have glorified you on the earth by completing the work you gave me to do." That work did not begin in Bethlehem. It did not begin with a manger or a miracle. It began in eternity. Before anything was made, there was a decision, a purpose, a role given by God, and a man willing to bear it. But what kind of glory is remembered before the world began? What light shined in that nothingness? What did Jesus see when he recalled that moment? Not thrones, not omniscience, but love, presence, the unmistakable warmth of being known and chosen, a glory not of nature, but of favor. Jesus was not God, but he was loved by God. He was not the source of divine power, but the bearer of a divine mission that would one day stretch across heaven and earth. Isaiah records God saying, "I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another," in Isaiah 42:8. And yet Jesus speaks of glory given, not a contradiction, but a revelation. This was not a shared throne. It was a trusted role, a divine appointment, not divine equality. In John 17:24, Jesus says, "Father, I desire that they also, whom you have given me, be with me where I am, so that they may see my glory. The glory you have given me because you loved me before the foundation of the world." This is not the language of a deity, but of a servant, of one longing for others to witness what had been hidden since before creation. This is the Jesus most never meet, Not the man on a donkey, not the child in the stable, but the one remembered before all time. A presence wrapped not in clouds or light, but in the deep affection of the one who formed him. Jesus was not equal with God, but he was precious to God. Not divine in nature, but divine in calling. Not the author of the plan, but the living answer to it. He didn't claim the power of God, he fulfilled the purpose of God. And that purpose, it wasn't small, it wasn't secondary, it was the center of everything. So when he touched the sick, he did so as one who had been entrusted. When he taught the crowds, he spoke as one sent. Every step, every breath was part of that ancient plan. That purpose formed before light touched the waters. The book of Revelation unveils a radiant, otherworldly image of Jesus. A figure dressed in white, with eyes like fire and a voice like rushing water. Yet this vision isn't transformation, it's unveiling. Revelation 1 describes the unveiling of a truth that had existed since before the dawn of time. But that majesty, that divine echo, is still to come. For now, we must dwell in the quieter truth, the pre-creation Jesus, not exalted, not worshipped, but chosen, named, treasured before time took form, before galaxies, before gravity, before light itself. There was God, and there was the one God would send, not a co-creator, not a deity, but a son, a servant, a vessel of divine purpose. And that purpose, that trust, it is only just beginning. Because what happens when eternity enters time? What happens when the one remembered in heaven walks among those who forget? The world Jesus entered was not ready for him. Not really. People were waiting for a Messiah, yes, but what they expected was power, authority. A king to overthrow oppressors, not a servant who would wash feet. The glory he carried was not the kind they recognized, because it wasn't the glory of domination, it was the glory of obedience, the kind of glory no empire could recognize, yet no darkness could extinguish. The Gospel of John makes it clear Jesus was sent. Again and again that word appears, sent, not as a co-creator or as the Almighty himself, but as the chosen one, carrying a mission written before the stars. He never claimed the title of God. He never demanded worship as the Almighty. Instead, he pointed upward, always, to the one who had sent him, to the one who had given him the words to say, the power to heal, the strength to endure. And what was that mission? To reveal the love of God in a way no one had ever seen. To show humanity that the unseen God had not forgotten them, that God's mercy wasn't distant. It had a face, a voice, a heartbeat, and that heartbeat had echoed in eternity before creation ever stirred. When Jesus prayed in John 17, he wasn't just speaking for himself. He was opening a window, a glimpse into a reality older than the universe, into a love that predates all things, a love that birthed the plan of redemption before there was even sin to redeem. It was a prayer not just for the present, but for the eternal, a moment where time bent back to touch what came before. That's why he could say in John 17:24 that he was loved before the foundation of the world, because he was chosen before the need arose, appointed to be the bridge long before the chasm ever appeared. He stood as the answer to a question humanity hadn't even asked yet. And here is the most astonishing part. The glory he asked to be returned to, it was not about him. It was about us, about making that divine love visible, about letting the world see the relationship that had always existed between the Father who sent and the Son who was sent, between the one who holds eternity and the one entrusted with its most sacred mission. This is why Revelation does not depict a Jesus who suddenly becomes glorious. It reveals a glory long hidden. It pulls back the veil. John, the disciple who once leaned on Jesus' chest during a meal, now falls to the ground like a dead man at the sight of him. Not because Jesus had changed, but because his true identity, his eternal purpose, had been fully unveiled. John describes him as one whose eyes were like flames of fire, whose voice thundered like rushing waters, his face shining like the sun in its full strength. And he speaks with a voice that says, "I am the first and the last. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore." That proclamation isn't about divinity in essence, it's about victory, about the completion of the mission, about the faithfulness of one who had been trusted with eternity's greatest task and had fulfilled it. Philippians 2 tells us that Jesus, though in the form of a servant, humbled himself, that he did not grasp for equality with God, but instead he took on the form of humanity. He obeyed, even to the point of death. And for that obedience, God exalted him, not as a reward for power, but as a response to faithfulness. That exaltation came not because he was God, but because he perfectly fulfilled the mission of the one who is. This is what the early believers saw, not a God walking the earth, but a man anointed, appointed, filled with the Spirit of God without measure, a man who had been with God before time and who would return to God when his work was done, the mediator, the bridge, the Son. His was not a borrowed identity or a temporary mask. His glory was real but given. His authority was true but derived, and in that he became something even more compelling than a deity on high. He became the proof that a human life yielded fully to God's will could carry the fullness of God's plan. And now, we return to the mystery that started it all. Who was Jesus before the creation of the world? He was the chosen one, the one known before anything was made, the one entrusted with glory, not as a possession, but as a gift, the one loved before the foundation of the world. A man destined for divinity, not by essence, but by exaltation. A son, not a self-existent being. He was the Word, not God himself, but the one through whom God's message and mercy would reach creation. When we understand this, the entire arc of Scripture changes. Jesus is no longer a mysterious fragment of the Godhead, but the centerpiece of God's plan. Not equal to God, but made glorious by God. Not claiming divine status, but chosen to carry the divine purpose to its end. And because he was faithful, God exalted him, that through him every knee would bow, not in fear, but in recognition of what was accomplished. This is the secret buried in the Bible, hidden in prayers, whispered in visions, echoed in the thunder of revelation, and in the silence before time. He was not God, but he was God's beloved, not the Creator, but the one through whom the Creator would reconcile creation. A man, chosen before creation, sent into time, raised to glory, and destined to return, not as God, but as the Son of God, as the one through whom God would reveal himself to the world, the firstborn of all creation, the beginning and the end, not by nature, but by appointment. So now we see Jesus not just in the cradle or on the cross, but in eternity's heart, waiting, listening, ready, chosen before all things, trusted with the greatest task the universe has ever known. And the final question lingers. If this is who he was before the world began, what does that mean for who we are now? Until next time, stay prayerful. And if this story opened your eyes to something new, consider subscribing. Leave a comment. What part of Jesus' eternal story surprised you most? Because sometimes the deepest truths are the ones hidden before time itself began.